Fazlina and Nabila, who will argue in favor of the motion. On the opposition side, we have Akila, Christina, and Aisha, who will argue against it. Each speaker will have 7 minutes to present their argument. After that, we will have a rebuttal session, followed by a short and concluding remarks. Okay, I encourage our participants to engage respectfully and follow the debate rules. Okay. Without further ado, let's begin with the first speaker from the proposition side. To start the debate, I invite the first speaker from the proposition side, Akila, to present her argument. 7 minutes.
Thank you. So good afternoon to our moderator, to our opponents, as well as our respected audience. So today, we at our proposition team, we stand in firm support of the motion that stimulus tests are necessary for language learning. So the stimulus test provide an objective and reliable measure of a student's language proficiency. So they create a benchmark or a standard criteria for assessing skills in reading, writing, listening, as well as speaking. So it ensures consistency in terms of the implementation of the test, in terms of the question, in terms of the test construction, as well as the grading. So it ensures consistency across different learners as well as different institutions. Furthermore, this test also motivates students by setting clear goals and provide relevant feedback for both learners and educators. So without standardized assessment, I believe that it will be hard for teachers to have an objective measurement of how to measure the students' progress accurately and to determine the effectiveness of the teaching in language learning. So throughout this debate, we will demonstrate how standardized tests benefit students, teachers, and institutions in promoting effective language learning. So the first argument is that standardized tests ensure fair assessment in terms of the objectivity as well as the clarity of the test. So one of the key reasons, we know that standardized tests it ensure fairness in a way that from the pre-implementation, from the planning, from the production of the test question until to the end, to the grading, to the implementation itself, everything was they have their own set of structure, the format and system, so it makes the test impartial and will not be subjected to bias, especially in the education system. So unlike informal assessment or unlike non-standardized tests, it can be influenced by subjective opinion. So let's say in a situation where a teacher from rural area in Kelantan and a teacher from a global school in KL, when they have to evaluate their students in maybe assessment, they will focus on the subjective, their own expectation of the students. So it creates inconsistency. So this is what we want to avoid. That's why we, in our team, we fight that standardized test. It ensures fair and consistent assessment. So when we have a standardized test, it allows learners from different backgrounds to be judged fairly, ensuring that what we test in the test itself is based on purely on language proficiency skills and not based on personal bias or any cultural bias. So, for example, we know that international language tests like MUEC and IELTS, it provides a standardized way to measure English proficiency. So it's standardized in a way that the implementation is they have their own date, they have their own format, they have their own time allocation, they have their own grading. So this format are not something that only the examiner know, the student also know. So both parties are aware, so it is a transparent system. Both know what they need to do, what they need to improve in order to score the test. So it is more accurate in terms of the marks. So without standardized tests, I believe that language assessment it will lack consistency. So it can easily cause
have Aisha from the opposition side. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you to the Speaker of the House. Good afternoon to honorable judges, conscious timekeeper, fellow debaters, and also an esteemed audience. We as to these oppositions have structured our case to take the stand against today's motion, which is our standardized test necessary for language learning. But before we come to our actual argument, we will define some important terms in this debate. So according to the American Psychological Association, standardized tests refer to an assessment instrument whose validity and reliability have been established by empirical investigation and analysis. So based on this definition, our first point is about how standardized tests do not accurately measure language proficiency. Standardized tests are often focused on theoretical knowledge and structured response rather than real-world application. So a student might achieve high marks on the test but struggle in real-life communication. So we need to think what language is about. So language is about communication. So communication is about expressing our thoughts, understanding others, and communicate well with others. So imagine a student who study really hard for grammar, for reading and listening and so on, and score high marks in exam but struggle in real life, in real work. For example, when they go to a restaurant to order, they struggle to order, communicate their wish. So we believe that standardized tests only focus on a structured approach to language compared to a real life approach such as the communication skill. I think that's all from us.
Thank you, Aisha. Next we have from the opposition side, Sabrina. You have 7 minutes.
Alright, thank you moderator and good afternoon fellow judges and also my team, my fellow teammates and also the opposition. Alright, as my team has already established, standardized tests provide an objective and a fair way to measure proficiency. But beyond that, standardized tests also play a crucial part in also tracking students' progress over time and also helping teachers how to evaluate students in a better way. I'm going to elaborate further on this. First, I'm going to give you an example. Imagine a student who wants to study abroad but struggles with certain aspects of English. Without standardized tests, how can this student know how to improve their English without knowing which skills to improve? For example, if we take math, they includes like writing, speaking, and also all those 5 skills that we need. For a student that is going abroad, they need to take like WET or IELTS or TOEFL to get into the institutes, right? When they take the WET, the students also need to take a test and pre-WET, and by doing the pre-WET test, they will know which aspects that they need to improve. For example, if their speaking skills are lacking, maybe they can spend more time on their speaking skills, and also during those times they can practice how to speak better so they can improve well during their actual exam. And then next, how can educators help the student focus on the weak areas? By knowing where the students need to focus, the teachers can also implement a plan how to help the students improve their skills. For example, during my experience in my population, all of the students need to do a pre-test. That includes all the writing, speaking, and reading tests. And during the results, the teachers can see which skills are the students are lacking. And then for overall, and then the teachers will see the results that most of the students are lacking in the reading or the writing aspects. And then after the results, the educators made a camp, like a short camp, to invite to invite students to improve their skills by joining the camp, so they can excel during the real web. Next, standardized tests also offer a clear benchmark for improvement. Unlike regular classroom assessment that vary between schools and teachers, standardized tests provide consistent and measurable feedback on students' language proficiency. Consider a Malaysian student who aspires to enter a university in the UK. She takes the IELTS and scores well in writing but receives a low score in speaking. Instead of giving up, she analysed how to improve her results, and also use that time and also the feedback to get a higher score in the test. My last point is standardized tests also do not only benefit students, they also help educators identify learning gaps and also refine their teaching methods accordingly. By analyzing common weaknesses in students' test performance, schools and language institute can adjust their learning plan, how to cater on the students' skills. I think that's all.
Thank you, Sabrina. Now may we have the second speaker from the opposition side, Christina. You have 7 minutes.
Assalamualaikum everyone, fellow judges and the jury. Thank you very much Is for the delightful intake. So I would like to also comment about that. You're saying that the standardized test is all about consistency, about fairness. But I feel like the standardized test is more towards an one-size-fits-all system. So it kind of defeats the purpose of meaningful language acquisition. So in a way, you're saying that maybe that it means that people study for the sake of acing all these tests instead of like actually learning and actually improving their language. So when we talk about fairness and consistency and test construction, there is also the need to point out about the external factors that also affects language acquisition. So the difference in test taking, so we also need to take into account the different in test taking ability, learning styles, and also background knowledge. So memorization is not all about standardized test is all about mostly focuses on memorization, and memorization does not like define the true language acquisition. So standardized test, it encourages more to rote learning where students memorize grammar rules and model answers instead of like naturally acquiring the language. So this limits their ability to use proper and meaningful language in real life. So when a person gets, for example, band 6 in UX, does that mean that the person is really fluently speaking? Does that person can fluently speak in real life?
Hey, this is supposed to be debate again.
So, for example, when a person is taking UX, so the student just prepares for written test, for the speaking test, and essays and all, and these are all like pre-learned phrases rather than understanding the real context of all the construction sentences. So for example, if they're given like an unfamiliar setting, they may struggle to like answer and adapt to that because they're too focused on just memorization instead of just actually learning it in real life. So it also to my next point, standardized tests also induces anxiety instead of motivating people because while some students may feel motivated by standardized tests, many
test anxiety, and test anxiety might affect negatively on the person. So, for example, if like the student actually is excellent in class and prepares excellence in class, but because that student is very anxious during the test, that might affect the person and that might cause the person to get bad results. When in fact that person is actually really good in English. So pressure and academic stress does not work for everyone. So it may affect the results of the person. So I think that's all from me.
Thank you, Christina. Now may I invite the last speaker from the proposition side, Nabila. You may present your points. You have 7 minutes.
So you can say no to the moderator.
Thank you to the respected judges, moderator. Okay, so I'm going to add some more points to our stance. So we believe that standardized tests are important for global recognition and opportunities. So as we all know, many universities these days they require like standardized English test scores as proof of students' language ability. So this global recognition actually ensures that students and professionals have access to educational and career opportunities worldwide. So without this standardized testing, learners will struggle to provide credible proof of their language ability. So imagine the students wanting to further their studies outside of the country. So one of the requirement would be their language proficiency. Sorry. So without the standardized test score, how will they prove their proficiency in English? So this does not only happen outside, it also happens inside the country. Even among us, in order for us to be here, they would need to see our standardized test proficiency, our language proficiency. So in our case, they will need to see our when we need to reach that the preferred level in order for us to be here. So that shows that the standardized test is very important in order for us to have opportunities to go further in our education or even in our jobs. So additionally, standardized tests also help to ensure that language proficiency is assessed based on a common framework, allowing institutions to compare applicants from different backgrounds fairly. So this universal measure of language skills enables mobility and enhanced employability, making it a crucial aspect of modern education and professional development. I think that's all from me.
Thank you, Nabila. And finally, we have the third speaker from the opposition side. Nabila, you have 7 minutes.
Honorable judges, esteemed audience, and good afternoon. As the third speaker of the opposition, I am here to reinforce our stance that standardized tests do not measure long-term progress effectively. Language learning is a continuous journey, and relying on a single test score fails to capture the true development of a learner's abilities over time. Standardized tests provide a snapshot of students' performance at a specific moment, often focusing on limited aspects of language proficiency. However, language acquisition itself is dynamic and influenced by various factors such as exposure, confidence, and practice. A student's abilities can fluctuate, and a one-time assessment cannot accurately reflect ongoing growth or identify areas needing improvement. Research indicates that alternative assessment methods offers a more comprehensive evaluation of a student's language development. Performance-based assessments, for example, engage students in a real-world task, providing insights into their practical language use and long-term progress. Additionally, research also indicates that performance-based assessment can positively impact learners' psychological well-being and motivation. And these findings suggest that incorporating performance-based assessments into language learning provides a more accurate and holistic measure of a student's language development over time, as opposed to relying solely
which often fail to account for individual learning trajectories. So, for example, consider a student who scores low on a standardized language test due to anxiety or maybe not being familiar with the test format. So, over the next few months, with increased exposure and practice, the student's speaking and comprehension skills might improve significantly. However, this growth remains unrecognized if assessments rely solely on the initial test score. And yeah, continuous evaluation methods would capture this progress better, providing a more accurate representation of the student's abilities. So in conclusion, standardized tests are insufficient for measuring long-term language development. Continuous assessments, on the other hand, including performance-based tasks, self-evaluations, and regular teacher feedback, offer a more accurate and holistic view of a student's progress. Therefore, we firmly stand by our position that standardized tests do not effectively measure the long-term progress of language learners. Thank you.
Thank you, Akila. Now we have finally finished with our both sides have finished with their arguments. Now we will move on to the rebuttal round, where each side can respond to the opposing arguments. Each speaker will have 4 minutes to counter the points made by the other side. So now we will begin with the proposition side. Akila, you will present your rebuttal.
Thank you to the speaker and opponent for the argument just now. So from their side, they has presented some compelling arguments, but upon closer examination, we see several flaws that we have to address in this rebuttal round. So the first flaw is in Aisha's point in terms of the standardized test does not measure a true language proficiency, because you mentioned that it focuses more on the structured approach of the language and it didn't focus on real-life communication, which is you mentioned about understanding thoughts, having a conversation, a negotiation, exchanging opinions. So what I want to report is that in standardized tests, you can see that you don't have to go as far as MUE or TOEFL, you just can go to SPM oral test. SPM oral test, they generally ask questions using real-life examples. That itself is actually it uses a real-life context, and to be prepared for that test, students have to, on their own time, they have to have the initiative to prepare, to to engage in the speaking test on their own, so they have to practice on different scenarios. I remember back then when I was studying, but then I have degree and SPM, we have the oral test for English. So the way that we practice is that we will compile several questions of the speaking topic, and we try to as naturally as we can engage in a discussion with our classmates. So that is how I believe that standardized test, I did not think that it did not cover for real life communication. Of course, the exam maker, the policy maker, they will include real life example in the test. They want our students to be able to use the language in real life, so that will be included in the question. And the students, they are aware of that. So it is on their own initiative for them to practice using the different scenarios of real life question and how they can use the language as naturally as they can in the standardized test. So what we want to measure in the standardized test, especially in speaking test, is not only the language use. It's not just a general speaking skill. What we want to see in the test is that it includes criteria such as the fluency, the pronunciation, the accuracy, the content of the point itself. So that is the criteria that we put in speaking test rubric. So we not only just focus on speaking, like just conversing, just talking the language. We want the student to be able, on their own free time, to train for this test itself. So that is in terms of language, not measuring language proficiency. So another thing is that I read just now in TOEFL speaking section, they have 4 questions, and for 4 questions, they include not only real life question, but also include academic and non-academic context. So it allows the student to be prepared for the test. So while preparing for the test, it allows the student to be aware of their own speaking progress. prepare for the test. So if they have test anxiety, then it's likely that they are not preparing enough. And there is one thing that you have to ponder. If you are in school and you are not preparing to learn the content, then what is the point being in school? So I think that is all the point for me.
Thank you, Ayola. Now, can we hear from the opposition side? Aisha, you present your repeater.
So good afternoon, everyone. So the Prime Minister, for the first point, the Prime Minister has said about how standardized tests provide objective measurement and also fair assessment. Our team disagree with this point because why are we using objective measurement to measure subjective people? As we know, humans are subjective. We are all different from each other. So why are we using objective measurement to measure human skills? So if you imagine the test, the structured test, the standard tests are structured, so it follows a format and it based on a syllabus. So if you imagine the test as a mode, we are actually trying to force our student to fit a mode that we create. So we disagree with the government point and that actually we believe that standardized tests also limit our student progress by fitting in the mode. And also the point that standardized tests provide a fair assessment. How is it fair? How is it a fair assessment when we have a student with different learning abilities and also skills? The purpose of the test is to measure a student progress, and if a student is slow to progress by the time of the test and they take the test and the result is not very good and we measure their skill as not very good, how is it fair to a slow learner? That is all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha. Now, can we hear from Is, the repeater?
Alright. Okay, thank you, Aisha, for your point. Although I do agree with some points from Aisha that you should not judge you should not like evaluate a student based like objectively. I do have some points that may refute your points earlier. For example, as I did my lingua skill earlier, actually tests like that already adaptive. Many standardized testing now utilize adaptive testing technology which adjust to the difficulty of level of the students. For your example earlier that you give, some students that have like low proficiency in English may not be able to answer the questions that the high proficiency students may be able to answer. We take math for example. While I do agree that math have some flaws in the formatting. For example, we start off the question with easy questions and then the harder questions and then the most extreme questions. For low proficiency students, they may be only able to answer the low level of questions and then they are not able to answer the higher level of questions, which seems like not fair to the students. But we also need to acknowledge that during times like this, there are already a lot of standardized tests like TOEFL and IELTS, and in my own experience, lingua skills that already do adaptive testing, where they adapt to your levels of skills proficiency. For example, during your readings section, they will see how many questions that you can score correctly, and if you cannot score more than 3 in one section, they will adapt the questions to become more low proficiency. So instead of just like failing straight to the B1, they will adapt their questions to be like at the B2 level, C1, and if they see that we can do better than that, then they will adapt the questions to be more higher level. So if you can answer the questions based on the adaptive testing, your results also will be higher. Sorry. And then I also would like to add on Akila's point earlier regarding the test anxiety. While I do agree that standardized tests increase anxiety, we also need to acknowledge that teachers play an important part with these difficulties. For example, the teachers already know what the format's going to be, what's the format going to be and all. So the teachers plays important role to accommodate to the students. How are they going to adapt to this question, to the exams? For example, they can give multiple mock tests to make the students get used to the exam. So later on, when they do the real life WAC or TOEFL, they can reduce their anxiety levels. And also, like Akila said earlier, that I need to mention again, test anxiety are not, as we all know, the WAC, the TOEFL, the IELTS, we all already know the formats. So it's not the standardized tests that are causing anxiety, it's the lack of preparations. So the students need to play this part to manage their stress, which also further our points that standardized tests are important in the students' life, as the students need to do critical thinking, and they need to improve their stress. They need to improve their stress management, and also it encourages the students to get ready with the real life situation early on, where they need to go to the job interviews, and then they need to communicate with higher authority people. So by doing this standardized tests, they can also improve. They can also it helps their personal growth to help them later on in the future. I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. Can we move on to Christina now? Our reviewer.
Thank you to the government side. So we will now make our review to some points earlier. So firstly is when we say that test anxiety is caused by the lack of preparation that affects anxiety. So you did not take into account several other causes. For example, external causes like disabilities, technical problems, biological factors, and also psychological environment factors. So firstly, some students might need all the preparation. They might take a whole week, the whole month for preparation alone, but they may still have stage fright when it comes to standardized tests. So that does not take into account that the lack of preparation that the person has. So next is biological factors. There are also biological factors that can affect test anxiety. For example, genetics, brain chemistry, and also hormonal changes. And also psychological factors. Some people have negative thinking patterns, and also they have performance pressure that also affects their called continuous practice. Continuous practice real-world usage. So when you're taking a test, it's not really meaningful learning because it may take into account like real-world application, but not really like you might not really like apply it in your life. So how can there be an actual improvement? After all, we're talking about language learning here, not language testing.
Thank you, Christina, for that rebuttal. Now we will move on to our last speaker from the proposition side for the presentation.
So to review Christina's point about test anxiety, we believe that removing standardized tests does not actually remove anxiety. So if standardized tests were removed, we really believe that we will not be stressed at all. Like even now, we are not even in a standardized test, but we are all stressed. Me, Aisha is not. So instead of removing a fair and structured measure, we should focus on helping students to develop resilience and test-taking strategies. So this sounds repetitive, but we should really prepare for the students. So in addition to
This chair is down. Wanna put down.
Christina mentioned that standardized tests doesn't support lifelong learning. So I believe that this is incorrect. While some elements of standardized tests it does involve memorization and relating. So they actually primarily encourage structured study habits that enhance long-term learning. So while students are actually learning, they are also actually while learning, they are also actually develop their skills in time management, in critical thinking, which could also be useful for them in their life.
Thank you, Nabila, for that final rebuttal. Now we will move on to Akila for her final rebuttal from the opposition side.
Thank you, our moderator. I would like to rebut on Nabila's point on how language testing how the standardized language tests are important for global recognition. While there is no denying that standardized tests, especially like the international ones like TOEFL, IELTS, and all of that are important for global recognition, especially for those who want to study abroad. We believe that it does not actually guarantee the person's actual ability to communicate effectively in real-world situations. And again, we are talking about language learning and not language testing. So why are we considering about global recognition when we should be focusing on the real meaningful learning of the language itself on its own, instead of going far talking about global recognition? Thank you very much.
So what's the
Thank you,
question?
Akila. So now we will move on to the final stage, which is the closing statements. Each side will have 7 minutes to summarize the key points. First, I invite a representative from the proposition side to give their final remarks.
So ladies and gentlemen, speaker and respected audience. So as we conclude our debate today, we want to reinforce the key points that our team highlighted. Why standardized tests we consider as necessary for language learning. So the first point from our side, we mentioned that standardized tests will provide a consistent and objective measure of language proficiency, because it ensures that all students, despite different cultural background, are evaluated using the same criteria using the same set of questions, and the validity and reliability of the test are already being tested by the government itself. So this allows educators to accurately identify which area of strength and weakness across different learners. And we want to highlight to stress on the consistency of tests, which is vital for us to track the progress and setting realistic goal for students. So next is that we also mentioned that tests also provide fairness and consistency, not only in terms of the implementation, the test construction, the even the set of grading also been fair and consistent. This is because we want to highlight that language is something that is subjective. Although, like I said earlier, that why do we want to use something that is objective in measuring subjective? But then language learning, in terms of standardized test, it also focus on other aspects, not only the subjective side, we also have the objective side. So we want to maintain on that, because this is in terms of, we usually mention that standardized test is something that's being done like wide scale. It's not only to cater certain group, we want to cater a large amount of group. So in terms of the efficiency, I believe that standardized test is more efficient, more fair in terms of the validity, reliability, even the interpretability of the test. And then from Nabila's side, Nabila mentioned about the recognition of the test result is important for global recognition. So this is important because we are talking about something, we are talking about different countries in another state. They have different set of achievement benchmark for English proficiency. So if we want to go there, we have to match that benchmark. So the global recognition in terms of the test, we can see that most IELTS candidates that get at least, I believe, 7.5 and above the band, they are usually very proficient, and it's proven. It's impossible for you to get 7.5 above if you are not at least proficient or an effective language user of English. So I believe that the standardized test, it matches up to the global recognition, and from our side we believe that it is necessary for language learning because it provides objective measurement. Students will know what they are learning, for what they are learning, the purpose, which areas they can improve respectively in terms of the language skill. And we also prepare students for global communication from the test question itself. So from our side, we urge the audiences and the speaker to consider the long-term benefit of this standardized assessment and recognize our role in language learning. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, a representative from the opposition side may present their final remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed judges and respected opponents, as we conclude this debate, let's take a moment to reflect on the key flaws of standardized language tests and why they are not the best measure of true language proficiency. First, standardized tests do not accurately measure language proficiency. Language is not just about memorizing grammar rules, filling in the blanks, or choosing the correct multiple choice answer. It is about communication, being able to express thoughts, engage in meaningful conversations, and adapt language in a real-world situation. A high test score does not guarantee fluency, and many individuals who perform well on these exams struggles to communicate effectively in real-life scenarios. Second, standardized tests create more anxiety than motivation. Instead of fostering a love for language learning, they turn it into a stressful and pressurized experience. Many test takers focus on strategies to beat the test rather than actually improving speaking, listening, reading, and writing skills. This anxiety can hinder performance, making the results an unreliable indicator of a person's true abilities. A truly effective language assessment should inspire confidence and encourage real-world usage, not create unnecessary stress. And third, standardized tests provide only a snapshot of the student's performance at a specific moment. These exams measure a narrow set of skills under artificial conditions, ignoring the dynamic nature of language learning. And proficiency is developed over time. not through a single time test. A true measure of language ability should consider long-term progress, real-world applications, and the ability to communicate in the diverse situations. Ultimately, language learning is about connection, understanding, and cultural exchange. It cannot be reduced to a standardized score. If we truly want to assess someone's language skills, we must look beyond the outdated testing methods and embrace more effective real-world assessment that reflect the way language is actually used. And for these reasons, we strongly affirm that standardized language tests are not the best way to measure proficiency.
Okay, we will now have a short Q&A session where both sides can answer the question from our audience. So if our audience, if you have any questions, you may ask to any of the sides.
I'm still happy though. Hi. I want to ask question to the proposition side. Just now, all the two of you mentioned that how standardized tests are objective, consistent, and fair. It's just that I'm not entirely disagree with that. It's just that I would like to ask your suggestions or if you can provide any better ways to consider those students with different socio-economic background. Because as you all know, MUET, TOEFL, IELTS, they cost a lot to enroll to sit for the exam, to sit for the examinations. And also, we cannot deny that the difference in socio-economic background impact the performance of the students. Some students who have high socio-economic background, they might have the exposure to the language before they sit for the examination. So, what would you say and what would you suggest to improve the fairness in that regard? Thank you.
Thank you, Izani, for that question. So you mentioned just now about standardized tests being expensive for students that comes from poorer socioeconomic background. So it is some alternative standardized tests aside from MUET and TOEFL and those that are expensive. So there's actually a free one, which is Duolingo English test. This can be easily accessible on internet. Anyone that have access to the internet, you can just take this test just for a basic level, just for basic screening of their English language proficiency. So another one is that offered by Cambridge also. That's your English Cambridge is also prepared, or you can take this test in their website. So this is some of the more in terms of online language proficiency tests. Another alternative that students from rural background, they can also focus on the community-based or school-based tests. So it's not just, the NASDAQ does not only refer to those international ones where, no, it also refers to tests that are being conducted by the government, by the school, by the teacher. Those tests that they have a strict or structured content or format based on standardized. So it doesn't have to be expensive. You can you can take what fits you the most. So that is in terms of the alternative standardized. Does that answer your question?
This one can be both. I have a question for any side can answer my question. So the question is, are standardized tests the most efficient way to assess large numbers of students? Thank you.
It seems like both sides are not. Are you going to answer? Okay, so I'm picking up this question. Is you ask if standardized tests are able to test a large number of students at once. From I would side with that yes. Because first of all, standardized tests, they are more efficient, more time saving, they are more reliable compared to non-standardized tests because the set of questions, the question they have, the government they have questions bank, so they don't have to start from scratch to provide the test to give out the questions to students. So they have this question bank where the teachers, the experts will gather and they will brainstorm for the questions together and provide a whole bunch of tests. So the test can be used at any time as long as the curriculum is still relevant. So in terms of the efficiency, we can distribute the test at a wide scale. We can cater to a larger scale of audiences. So the teachers don't have to alter the question for this class, one set of questions, for this class, that one set of questions. So it is efficient, it saves time in terms of the uniformity, the consistency, the fairness of the questions also being ensured because it is something that's being done by the government, even if not by government, let's say that's on the school level. The school, maybe the Panitia.
Hello.
So like for English fellow, we have the English teachers in one sitting, they will brainstorm the questions together. So it's something that can be used anytime for a large scale of number, more system, more consistent. The scoring, they have also come up with a rubric and maybe in terms of the scoring also will be more easy. That is for this.
The opposition side. Any points from the opposition side?
We should be fighting. Standardized test is not good. There should be another efficient way.
Betul. Kot dia boleh cipta satu way dia walaupun tak ada.
Future teachers.
Let's think together.
You want to ask me questions?
Do you
Can we add some more point?
any
What to add?
Oh, Isman to add.
Sure. I'm open for any answers.
In addition of Abila's point, I don't think standardized exams are the most efficient way because standardized exams, like Abila said, sorry,
It's okay, it's okay. Keep going. Continue.
like Abila said, standardized exams have rubric. So by having this rubric, the teachers, we can avoid teachers' bias, while also we can avoid teacher bias while assessing the students' performance. Besides that, we can also, in a large scale, the teachers may not be able to assess the students individually and give them a personal feedback. So by doing this standardized examination, the students can do self-feedback when they assess themselves on on which part they need to improve. Because it might be hard for like large schools for teachers to give feedback to their students personally in a large numbers. Yes.
the opposition side? Yeah.
So for our part, we agree that it is efficient for a larger scale, but we have to take into account quality over quantity. So it may able to access a large number of people, but the quality of performance of the student aligned to the quantity that we want to assign them to. So that's all.
Okay. Another question. This is what I would like to ask for the opposition side. You have mentioned just now that standardized tests have caused students to feel pressurized and also some psychological effects to the students. So if we were to abolish the standardized test, how is it that we can instill motivation towards learners or students
by using the alternative test. I mean, taking example of MOEX or IELTS, we already know that what we are going to be assessed into, so that students have clear goals about what they want to study, what they want to prepare before the exam started. So how is it that using alternative tests would make students become more prepared and have motivation towards clear goal for the assessment?
Thank you very much for the question. So your question again is on how can we motivate students, is it? Without standardized tests. Okay, because since we are talking about language learning and motivation, we believe that standardized tests should not be the only motivational factor to students learning. Because after all, we are learning language, something that we use every day, and we believe that if we want to learn something that we practice every day, it has to be in something that is actually relatable for the learners, and it doesn't have to be a test. And that's why that we have right now we have a lot of alternative assessment in the form of performance-based assessment, like role playing, and then project-based assessment like that. And while of course we believe that it can actually keep the motivation up, because these kind of assessments, they don't actually feel like assessment, because it's something that you do every day. You talk to your friends, and maybe you are given different settings or scenarios for you to talk about, and it doesn't feel like really a test, and that's how you will enjoy the learning process rather than getting stressed out about the standardized test. That's all.
Okay.
We end this session first. We end this session. We are going to have a discussion about this. Okay. Mana pun yang telah, tak